Mark Carney's list of conflicts of interest has been published by the government. It is 16 pages, single-spaced. Here it is, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of companies in which he holds significant shareholdings. He filled out this form months ago, but it was only released now after the election. It shows you how little we know about the man who was installed as our prime minister. That's why the media party tried so hard to get us and other independent journalists kicked out of the leaders' debates, where we put a few questions to the party leaders. They didn't want questions like, why do you have 3 passports? Which country did you say you were resident in your last tax return? Are you holding any assets in offshore accounts like you set up for Brookfield when you were its chair? Do you have any tax avoidance strategies you're using personally? When was the last time you spoke with anyone at Brookfield? And so obviously, why won't you sell your millions, or is it tens of millions, or is it hundreds of millions of dollars worth of stocks? Keep scrolling through the list. He owns shares in hundreds of companies. And when you own a stock, unless you're like a child or doing it as a game or something, you don't just own one share. You typically own in groups of a board lot, 100 shares or more. A man of Carney's seniority and seriousness wouldn't mess around with a few $100 here or there. I can't believe he would go to the trouble of adding stocks to his portfolio for less than $100,000 per investment. But again, we're not allowed to know the facts, and our morally superior journalists had more important questions to ask, like this one that they took up time in the leaders' debate for.
Est-ce que vous en achetez encore des produits américains? Est-ce que vous achetez des fraises des États-Unis? Vous envoyez fraises des États-Unis? Hein?
OK. Je dois vous donner une réponse bizarre, dans un sens bizarre, parce que étant Premier ministre, je n'achète plus des fraises et tout cela. Quelqu'un le fait.
That's what the media party thought would be a good question for a limited time to put to the leaders. What are you boycotting? But only boycotting for American products, not boycotting Chinese products, even though they have a huge punitive tariff on our canola farmers. But the real answer is, of course, you can't really separate yourself from the U.S. economy or the Chinese economy in a meaningful way. On the U.S. side, from high-tech products like a smartphone to online products like social media to fruits and vegetables to most of our cars, et cetera. It's all either American or largely American. Try buying anything at Walmart that's not from China. So it was sort of a dumb question. My point is, from an informational point of view, that question didn't lift any load, as opposed to something like, why do you insist on keeping hundreds of stocks, each of which puts you in a conflict of interest about that particular company? Why are you hanging on to them? Are you still looking around for a better gig? I mean, that's what Carney has done before. He was at the Bank of Canada, and that wasn't enough for him, so he went to the Bank of England. And that wasn't enough for him, so he went to the United Nations and the World Economic Forum, and at the same time, he became the chairman of Brookfield. So you can imagine how he used that. Imagine being a boss at the World Economic Forum and the UN while running Brookfield. Imagine how he feathered his own nest. But even that wasn't enough. So now he's come to Canada. And in a few months, he's been installed as prime minister, first in a party vote, a party nomination, conducted 100% online, which you can read as vulnerable to hacking, where literally the majority of votes were disqualified. So he becomes prime minister in a murky deal. And weeks later, it's confirmed in a national election with 43% support. And we don't know a thing about him, do we? And even now we don't. Now that he's been in office for a while, he doesn't really like spending time in Ottawa. Why does he own all those stocks, though? Why does he refuse to sell them? If we know what they are, surely he knows what they are, and everyone in his staff and all his MPs know what they are. And he's not going to forget that he was the chairman of Brookfield. So why doesn't he give it up? Everyone in his whole team, all the MPs, all his staff, know what they're supposed to do. Do not offend the boss. Do not financially harm the boss. He is a walking conflict of interest times 600. You know, I'm not naturally against billionaires. I'm not a communist. Sometimes billionaires become rich because they've actually done something valuable for an enormous amount of people who happily pay them. Elon Musk would be an example of that. He's just done so many things that people like, they're happy to pay. There's a billionaire named David Sachs who helped start PayPal with Elon Musk and other super smart guys like Peter Thiel. David Sachs has since invested in other winners like SpaceX. He's more than a billionaire. And Trump asked this guy, David Sachs, to be his cryptocurrency czar to help modernize U.S. policy towards high-tech finance and things like that, to make sure that China didn't get too far ahead, to make sure prosperity and growth and freedom would continue, not regulation, which was sort of the Democrat way. So Sachs agreed to serve the government. And he did something that I just think is amazing. Maybe it's obvious, but he sold all of his own crypto before he took the job. More than $200 million worth of cryptocurrency. Just in the past few months alone, that would have made him tens of millions of dollars of lost growth. But he sold it all before he took the job. And that's not all. He went further. He sold all of his shares in what were related at all to artificial intelligence, or AI. Why would he do that? Because he decided that he had made a lot of money in his life, probably more than he'd ever need, and it was time to serve his country. And he had really strong views about how that should be done and how to improve cryptocurrency and how to improve America and improve the world, at least how he thinks that should be done. He thought it was a higher calling, I think. I mean, maybe I'm naive, but a guy who sells hundreds of millions of dollars worth of stock and crypto so he has no conflict of interest, that sort of sounds noble. And he didn't want anyone to be able to say that his advice or decisions were for his own personal benefit. So he just sold it, and he goes in with clean hands. I think that's incredible leadership right there. I mean, even if you disagree with what David Sachs does, and I really don't have a strong understanding of what he's going to do, would you agree with me that he is morally trustworthy, even if his judgment is wrong in the end? So back to Mark Carney, why would he do the exact opposite? Why would he keep literally hundreds of different companies' stocks? And don't tell me that there's a blind trust or a screen. We all know what he owned and what his company, Brookfield, owned, that he chaired. It's not even the point. The point is why? Why is he doing this? Why is he insisting on this? And remember the one time the CBC actually asked him about this, my weight loss challenge competitor, Rosemary Barton. Carney attacked her personally when she asked about this stuff. Remember that?
The rules say that those assets should be publicly disclosed within 120 days, which means you'll campaign in a coming federal election, most likely within the next 120 days, and are serving as Prime Minister now, with Canadians not being aware of what potential conflicts of interest you sought to avoid.
What possible conflict would you have, Stephanie? Stephanie, I'm complying with the rules. I'm complying with the rules in advance. Point final.
Are you saying you are not open to any conflict of interest?
Yes.
Trump spent most of his life in the private sector. There's no possible conflict of interest in your assets. It's very difficult to believe.
Look inside yourself, Rosemary. I mean, you start from a prior of conflict and ill will. I have served in the private sector. I have stood up for Canada. I have left my roles in the private sector at a time of crisis for our country. I'm complying with all the rules. Your line of questioning is trying to invent new rules. I'm complying with the rules that Parliament has laid out and the responsibilities of the Ethics Commissioner. And I will continue to comply with those rules.
I'll give her credit. That was the one time she actually asked a critical question. Now, the Liberals have set up what they call an ethics screen. What a joke that is. What is an ethics screen, you ask? So there's supposed to be a senior staffer that whenever an issue arises that Carney has a stake in, because he refuses to sell his stocks, that staffer is supposed to take him out of any meetings and make sure he doesn't engage in the decisions about them. Really? He's got hundreds of companies in every possible walk of life. It's actually shocking. In fact, going through the list, the most surprising thing, actually it's not surprising at all, is how few Canadian companies are in there. I found a few. He simply doesn't believe in investing in Canada, personally, that is. As you know, his last corporate act as chairman of Brookfield was to move their head office from Toronto to New York City. Is Mark Carney by any chance planning to move to New York in 4 years or 8 years? And if not, why on earth is he keeping those stocks? Why is he doing it anyways? Why doesn't he do the ethical thing like David Sachs did and sell his stocks? And even put aside the ethics, which you have to do with liberals. How on earth can he possibly run a country if he is conflicted on pretty much every single industry there is? Tech companies, social media companies, Altria, the tobacco company, Amazon, Airbnb, American Airlines, American Express, Amgen, Aon. These are huge companies, and boy, he sure loves the United States. No elbows up for him in his private life. Apple, Archer Daniel Midlands, that's a GMO company. AT&T, that's the phone company. You don't think he's going to have some rulings that affect telephone or cable competition in Canada? BAE, Baker Hughes, weapons manufacturers. Same thing. You don't think he's going to deal with something like acquiring a new fighter jet for Canada that touches on these companies? Why won't he just sell them? Bank of America, he has a bunch of American banks. Why won't he sell them? Donald Trump has specifically said giving access to American banks to sell mortgages in Canada is something he demands. How can Mark Carney make a decision when he owns stock in those banks? Why is he putting himself in a conflict? Berkshire Hathaway, but of course, I'm roughly going alphabetically. BlackRock, Boeing, Booz Allen, another military staffing company, works for the CIA. That's actually where Edward Snowden was. Drug companies like Bristol Myers Squibb. Now, there are some oil companies in there. I saw one of them, Canadian Natural, the American company Chevron, chemical company Celanese. It's sort of hard for me to understand how he can be such a big green activist for us, but personally, he loves oil companies. I don't quite get that. He's even got Chipotle in there. Banks, insurance companies, Cigna, Citigroup. I'm just reading out a few of the ones that I recognize, and I'm only in the C's. He's got 600 of these. Tech companies like Coinbase and Comcast, ConocoPhillips, another big American oil company, Costco. You name it, it's on there, if it's an American company. He owns Meta. That's the company that owns Facebook and Instagram. He owns Alphabet. That's the mother company that owns Google and YouTube. You know, the liberals went out of their way to really go after both of these in their Online Harms Act, which he says he's going to bring back in. The liberals want to tax these companies with an internet tax. They've talked about that. They're already shaking down Google for $100 million a year for favored journalists. Facebook refuses to go along with that. How can a prime minister that has holdings in each of those companies be a part of the decision? And don't we need the prime minister to be the decider? Are you going to let Stephen Guilbeault, the heritage minister, be the decider? But really, why won't he just sell them? What on earth is wrong with him? Why doesn't he put Canada first? He's rich enough. He'll get super rich in cash the day he sells it. Why won't he sell his stocks? Is it vanity? Is it greed? Is it some sense that he's above criticism? He really has taken so little in his life, so little criticism, so little sparring, so little, questioning. You don't get questioned when you're at the World Economic Forum or the UN or the chair of Brookfield. The seas part before you. Everyone says, yes, sir. I don't think he's used to being challenged on things. Is he above all this? Like Leona Helmsley said, that laws are just for the little people. Astonishingly, Donald Trump slapped Canada with a 35% tariff the other day, and Mark Carney refused to cut short his vacation. Is that the same thing going on? I mean, he's above all this. He's not going to change his lifestyle to accommodate us. I mean, he's worked so very hard to be prime minister. What? Have they even had 10 days of parliamentary sittings this year? I mean, His Majesty hasn't come back yet. I guess we'll be learning about Mark Carney the hard way, won't we?